up, I saw some bits and pieces of the little Shaq interview or whatever this was, I see the usual suspects are at it, Canelo owned Crawford on the whole resume topic, and, I see what everybody's saying, I get it. Crawford, he's been in this situation, especially in the past few fights of his career. This conversation has always come up, Keith Thurman and guys like Danny Garcia, they all tried ganging up on him, Sean Porter, Earl Spence, of course. We've seen this game before, and this is just more assurance, this is more confidence building. To me, I still see this as, at the end of the day, group therapy session. When Brook fought GGG, for example, I thought Brook was doing pretty good in that fight. Now, eventually, size did play a factor in that fight, but I think skill-wise, boxing IQ-wise, if Brook was the same size, I think he would definitely beat GGG, who, to me, again, you guys have no problem praising a guy like GGG who fought nobody. You know what I'm saying? But, again, everybody has inconsistent standards for the most part. Amir Khan, it's the same type of thing. We'll use the Amir Khan versus Canelo fight. I think Amir Khan made a very good showing of himself, considering that he had to fight at 155-pound catch weight. They even had to mess with the punch stats and make it seem like he did less than what he did versus Canelo. But size eventually did come in as well, But skill-wise, boxing IQ-wise, again, I didn't see much separation between a Canelo and Amir Khan. And I know I'm kind of using boxing triangle theory here. Trust me, guys, I get it. I'm going to get plenty of you in the comment section making your little comments about this. But the thing is, I'll see an Amir Khan versus, Terrence Crawford. Bud does what nobody's ever done to Amir Khan. And Amir Khan, he had to pull some, let me quit in a fight. His endowment magically is now on his leg, you understand? It's not in a normal place where everybody else's junk is, you know what I'm saying? But Crawford was thoroughly outboxing Amir Khan and showing that you're nowhere close to my level. You understand? People say Crawford's a slow starter. He immediately knocked down Amir Khan just like he did Errol Spence, by the way. Crawford always gets these, if guys ain't been knocked down, they ain't never been knocked out before. He always pops a lot of people's cherries for some reason. And again, when I compare his performances with these guys, with everybody else, he always is able to do to these guys what these other elite so-called fighters have never been able to do. I've talked about this before. These guys, they try to act like, they have to make themselves into Voltron. They have to form up like Voltron, but, make themselves as a house of cards. Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, and Thurman, they all, again, they assembled like Voltron and they became this house of cards, like we all fought each other. Who you fought? And I see that people, they can't get past this stuff. Again, do I really need to break down scenarios in Canelo's resume? Do you understand? Do I need to break down how you picked on a guy who just got charged for sexual assault? He punched out his assault victim's dog. He even got caught in the bushes outside of the assault victim's residence. The guy later came out and told you himself that you were ignoramus, if you put your money on me. I'm not going to use names. I'll let you guys figure that type of stuff out, But again, you know what I'm saying? It's a little weird, Canelo's career. It's very inconsistent, Crawford, he did bring up Postal and things like that, but he did bring up the fact that they're not commercialized. And again, I'm sorry, Berlanga and guys like Munguia, they're commercialized, but what are they? You know what I'm saying? How did they earn a fight with Canelo? And again, I always got to ask myself, Crawford's never fought nobody. He's also a bum who can't sell tickets. But people always need their biggest paydays for Crawford. And Crawford has this standard that nobody else, is put into for some odd, strange reason. But my thing is this. Canelo, he's a solid technician. I'm going to go ahead and give you my opinion on the fight flow before this fight, because I love to do this just to see how accurate I'm going to be later on. And like I said, my track record, I think, speaks for myself. Speaks for itself for the most part. But Crawford, when you're fighting Crawford, it's a tightrope. The ring's not the same. you know, when you normally fight guys like Berlanga or Munguia, by the way, landed over 200 punches on Canelo, guys, and he won about 5 rounds. You know, we won't pay attention to that type of stuff. I already brought up guys like Amir Khan, Larry Mosley. You know, we can throw Laura in there. Of course, we can throw in Floyd. Bivol, he had a pretty good style. You know, he went more with volume punching. I think he did have Canelo hurt, I think around the 11th to 12th round. I think it was round 11, and we saw Canelo get frustrated. And Canelo was given the first 4 rounds magically and coincidentally, although I didn't see that with my eyes. You know, we get to a point where, again, some of these fighters are created in a boardroom. And some of these fighters are not allowed into the boardroom. You know, some of these fighters, they like to play keep away. And we see even fighters like drawn in his boots starting to rely on this type of theatrics and whatever else. But Crawford, again, was a guy who, you know, he's basically a Cinderella man. He should not even be in the part of the story that he's in right now. You know what I'm saying? And we always go back to this let's play popularity contest to psych ourselves up. You know, I fought these guys. I fought Sean Porter. I fought Danny Garcia. You know, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? Did that help Errol Spence, by the way? Why couldn't Sean Porter or any of those guys do what Crawford did to Errol Spence? Why not Danny Garcia? You know, if they're so elite. And that seemed to be the topic of the conversation that people are kind of focusing on right now during the Shaq interview. But regardless of all that, you know, again, remember everything that's being said today, and remember everything that's being told to you today. You know, I've been through this process so many times. Popularity contest isn't going to do nothing for nobody in this fight, guys. It's just not. You know, you're not going to get these magical skills given to you, you know what I'm saying, because you fought this guy. You know, I always thought guys like Triple G and Canelo were overrated, but, you know, that's just me. You know, you guys, again, you don't keep the same standards all around, and it's the same with you Wilder fans. This is why I stick out of the, you know, the proxy beta male race war that's on the internet when it comes to sport of boxing. Although I do have to commend the Mexican fight fans. You guys haven't been that racist, you know what I'm saying? You haven't. You know, I usually get some racist remarks and things like that. You guys have been cool, you know, so kudos to you guys for that. But, you know, but the fight flow, let's get back to that. You understand? Because this is basically me beating a dead horse as I've always beaten when I start covering these fights. You know, but the thing is, Crawford, he really can set himself apart against competition. You know, I don't see Canelo really do that. I don't see too many other guys do that. You know, maybe Usyk, Inoue, you know, you can put those guys kind of in the same category right now. But Canelo, I don't think he's top 3. You know what I'm saying? That's just my opinion. I've never seen him really set himself apart. I've seen him have to rely on the machine aspect of boxing. And I think, you know, he's not really this confident for this fight, but the fight flow. When you're fighting Crawford, you're fighting on a tightrope. Again, the ring's not the same as the ring when you're fighting a guy like Berlanga or Munguia. You know what I'm saying? Crawford, mentally, kind of like Lomachenko used to do people, he could mentally drain fighters, you know? And he's got to keep you guessing what he's going to go with. He's going to get you to overextend. You know, the game with the feet is just crazy enough as it is before we even get to the punches when it comes to Terrence Crawford. And again, Canelo, he's not really a, you know, just like Floyd Mayweather, he didn't really use a size advantage and whatever else. You know, his youth, none of that stuff against Floyd. But he's not a very active fighter. I know punch stats will say otherwise, but I go over these punch stats too to make sure that there's no trickery going on while I'm watching these fights, like the Munguia fight, for example. Canelo supposedly landed about 55 to 60% of all his punches, you know, in that fight, you know, majority of the rounds, and I just didn't see that while I was watching the fight. I was watching this guy get clipped by Munguia, again, a straight up and down fighter, you know, but I wasn't really tracking what the punch stats and the story of the fight was being told to me. For some odd reason. You know, I go deep when I go into this stuff. But the battle of the feet alone is always a problem for opponents when they come across Crawford. They don't know what this guy's going to do. He incorporates multiple levels. You know, Canelo does that to a certain extent, but again, I think Crawford has Canelo beat in pretty much all categories, other than physical size and things like that, steroids and things such as that. But that in itself, and especially mixed with Canelo not really being, you know, a very active fighter, you're already playing into Crawford's game. You know what I'm saying? But I see this chess game, just like the Madrimov fight, I see a lot of respect from the bigger, more experienced, better resume fighter in Canelo. There's going to be plenty of respect there. Just like I told you guys in the past, I don't see your guys being the 800, 900,000 punch fighters that they're going to be when we were talking about guys like Sean Porter, you know, and Errol Spence. You know, Canelo, again, you're already going to be fighting into Terence Crawford's game. Crawford has been training like a madman against bigger men. You know, I also get into the sparring stories and everything else when I actually do start to look at these fights. And what I'm hearing is pretty crazy. But regardless of all that, you know what I'm saying? The feet battle alone is going to be a lot for Canelo, who does get tired more easily. You know what I'm saying? And then we're going to actually have this punch placement and things. I know the majority of the rounds that Canelo is going to get in this fight is going to be when he starts throwing more output. And then the commentators and everybody else are going to act like when he lands like a shoulder punch that was blocked or something, they're going to act like it was like a KO blow. You know, those type of rounds are going to be Canelo rounds. But Crawford is consistently going to be landing the more cleaner punches. He's going to be catching Canelo with his footwork, by the way. You know, I'm not getting too deep into this yet. This is just fight flow. I will give it more detailed prediction as we move forward with this fight, as I hear more of what's going on, as I get to see more footage and things like that. But I'm just telling you the fight flow right now. You understand? Canelo on average loses way more rounds than a Terence Crawford. I'm sorry. It's just like Deontay Wilder. Canelo falls into that category, but where he always gives up a lot of rounds because he knows for, you know, maybe other reasons that he's still not going to lose. You know, we don't have to get into those aspects of it as well. You know, and then there's this factor where you are an assisted fighter. You know, everything was practically given to you. You get to pick and choose your opponents basically your whole entire career. You understand? Controversy before you guys even knew Canelo existed was already present in Canelo's career. You know what I'm saying? That guys like Vasquez, you know, another guy you had size advantage over. You know, another thing too is Canelo doesn't do too well against older fighters. You know what I'm saying? GGG was old. And again, GGG was a fighter that didn't fight nobody. He did pretty decent against Canelo Alvarez, although he was a very decorated amateur. But, you know, and we all know the Eastern European background. Those guys are pretty good, you know. But, again, I've watched GGG against certain fighters. He didn't look that good to me, and these were no-name guys. You know what I'm saying? And this is while they were trying to build him up, you know. Popularity contest gets you so far in this sport. And when you're finally facing the truth, it's a scary thing for guys like Canelo. It's a scary thing for guys like Tank Davis. You know what I'm saying? It's a scary thing for guys like, you know, Errol Spence's and these guys that they're telling you is the best kind of guy. It's a scary thing for the Deontay Wilders. You know what I'm saying? But I'm telling you, just the battle of the feet right out is going to be crazy for Canelo, and he's not going to really be used to it. We know that Crawford isn't a runner, although he is going to run at times, and he has the right to do so. And I'm glad that he's sticking to his guns, that nobody's going to tell me how to fight. But typically, it becomes a tightrope game of chess. You understand? You're playing chess with Crawford while you're on the tightrope. So not only are you worried about the moves that are being done, the pieces that are being taken from you and things like that, you know, but you're also simultaneously on a tightrope while you have to keep all this into account. And again, this fight's going to be mostly in the middle of the ring because, again, it's like, you know, Crawford's already seen the Floyd Mayweather fights and things like that. He's got a good boxing brain, you know, but again, the feet alone is going to be a very difficult aspect for Canelo to have to get used to. You know what I'm saying? And he is going to get caught. He is going to get countered. Crawford does have faster hand speed. He's more accurate. He's a better counter puncher, although he is the smaller guy. My recommendation for Crawford will be to put, you know, unlike the Madrimov fight, put more emphasis on the jab. It's going to be there all night, trust me. Both guys, but especially Crawford, is susceptible to the right hands. Canelo does have a weakness with the right hand when you time him perfectly, especially when he's trying to set up his left hook. You know what I'm saying? But go ahead and watch the 10th round in GGG versus Canelo 2. You know, Canelo did get hurt in that fight. I believe it was in the 10th round. I could be wrong. It's around there. It's been a while since I watched it. But he managed to land a lead right onto Canelo when he was getting ready to throw a punch. And that stuff's there all night because Canelo opens himself up like an action movie star when he throws punches sometimes. You know what I'm saying? It reminds me of King Hippo, but it also reminds me of Van Damme when you see these, you know, really cinematic type sequences in Van Damme movies where both of his arms are at the side of his bodies, you know, outside his shoulders. Canelo does this type of stuff for some reason. Also, we could get into Canelo's footwork and what mistakes he makes there, but again, I will give a more detailed prediction and things like that later on. You know, I did say 7-5 for my prediction, and this was already given to you a long time ago. I'm basing that off of what I think the judges are going to have it. You know, I think it could easily be around a 8-4, 9-3 type performance for Terrence Crawford. But we're talking about the right hand, how it's dangerous for Crawford. Crawford is at that point of his career, just like a Floyd Mayweather, where he has to get hit first to kind of wake up in these fights. You know, he is susceptible early on, and he's also susceptible mid-fight by the time he already has fighters figured out. And he does kind of lull to sleep and things like that. But again, Canelo himself is actually susceptible to the jab and the lead right as well. You know, especially when he wants to do his little roid rage burst that he does from time to time, and then he'll have to recover again. I see this, again, playing very similarly to the Madrimov fight again. Crawford didn't run in that fight either, by the way. But Madrimov had a lot more crazier angles. You know, I think he had more athletic footwork than Canelo Alvarez. You know, he was a little bit more trickier opponent to kind of figure out than a Canelo. You know, Canelo's going to get to a point where he's just frustrated. He's going to throw hard punches. And again, the commentators, even though they don't land clean in their block, just like against Bivol, they're going to act like this guy just landed, you know, knockdown punches and KO punches. You know what I'm saying? They're going to overblow everything Canelo does. You know, but Crawford, he's going to need to watch out for the right. He needs to not hesitate on throwing his left if he starts in southpaw stance. It's going to help him offset Canelo wanting to throw his right hand. You know, and Canelo, there's going to be times when he gets desperate in his fight, especially when he knows when he's down. You know what I'm saying? And he is going to throw more punches in those type of rounds. And of course, commentary in the story of the fight, they're going to tell you, oh, Canelo just had a crazy round, you know, just because he threw more output. But he's going to get desperate, especially when he knows when he's down. He's going to start throwing more hard punches and things like that. But I'm still not really worried about this fight at all, to be quite honest with you. And Crawford always exceeds what I predict. I always give safe predictions on this channel. You know, I put it at a level where I think is going to be highly accurate, which it normally is. But he always seems to always exceed what it is that I do predict. You know what I'm saying? And he can easily catch Canelo again. The name of the game, it's the punch you don't see. And we all saw a guy like what Jose Cotto, again, was able to do to Canelo Alvarez. You understand? So, again, we'll see. I know Crawford is a very strong dude. He has freakish strength. He has attributes and, again, X factor that a lot of these fighters don't seem to have. I know he's weak in the area of popularity contests and, you know, names that look good on paper. You understand? But a lot of these guys that Crawford did face, you know, he only got the Gamboa fight because Mickey Garcia was ducking Gamboa, for example. But again, you know, Crawford is again, it's more so the fact that he's been used to have to be the janitor. He has to fight the fighters that nobody else wants to fight. Danny Garcia, again, dug Postal, you know what I'm saying? They didn't want that fight. You know, they wanted him to stay within the PBC cinematic universe and opponents that have 2 weeks notices, although they may have names and things like that. You know, again, Crawford was never supposed to reach this level to begin with. And Crawford's been making the boxing world look real stupid. And another thing we need to end this video with, because I know I babbled, you know, but again, what are you guys going to say on fight night? Typically what has happened in these fights when you're popularity contest guys, you know, even to Shane Mosley. Crawford did it to a Shane Mosley what nobody ever did before. Not a, a Thurman, not a Danny Garcia, not a Errol Spence, for example. But regardless, his daddy had to throw in the towel for him because daddy could see what was going on in that ring. But regardless of all that, you guys always diminish the win. So you got to make up your mind which story we're sticking to. You know what I'm saying? Is Canelo supposed to just beat this dude, or is he shot? Is it Turkey's fault? We need to come to a consistent storyline with this fight. That way you guys will know what you are actually going to say by the end of the fight. But I believe just like everybody else, you're going to diminish the win. Although Canelo's supposed to be the greatest dude of this era and whatever else by some of you, but again, we got to come with a consistent story. But I think at the end of the day, the guy who's supposed to win, the guy that you guys are acting like you're confident about, he's going to be the guy that you're going to now diminish. And this was what was smart about this Shaq episode as well. He said, you're going to be an elite fighter on fight night, right? You know what I'm saying? Crawford is getting subtle even when it comes to the mind games, and I'm loving what I'm seeing. And again, you guys, I have a feeling this is going to just play out how it's always played out. You're going to diminish the win at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying? And Crawford's going to ride out in the sunset. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, guys. I don't really see much difference from Errol Spence or Sean Porter or Kell Brook. You know what I'm saying? Crawford has always set himself apart, and he's only had troubles with like the Madrimovs and the Mean Machines of the world because he probably didn't want to fight those guys, to be honest with you. He wasn't motivated. But whenever they say this is the best fight of your career, that's when Crawford tends to show out. And again, mix that with the fact that Canelo, he never really does good versus old opponents, and quite frankly, there's a lot of controversy surrounding, Canelo. There's a lot of hype and popularity contest that's clouding a lot of reality of this fight. And today I'll get the clown emoji that I normally get, and a laugh emoji and whatever else, and a little bit of racism sprinkled in there too. But, at the end of the day, I always tell you guys, make sure you come back after the fight. Let's see how accurate I was. Hold me to my word. And we'll just see how this thing plays out. But I think it's still going to, we've already seen this episode too many times. I think I'm going to be highly accurate per usual. And Crawford is going to be 3-time undisputed and fighter of the decade and all that stuff that comes with it. However many time Ring Magazine at the end of the day, and it's all because he was not bred and relied on the machine. The system that people like Canelo and the Tank Davises of this world have relied upon to keep them afloat. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.